I worked a 14-hour shift with no dinner, my stomach growling so loud it felt like shame. And in that noisy kitchen full of steam and clattering pans, I thought no one noticed how I was fading. But what I didn't know was that the quiet dishwasher in the back was about to save me in a way that would change how I saw kindness forever. Hunger has a way of humbling you, of making you feel smaller than you are. And that night I was shrinking with every passing hour. I was just a line cook, one of the dozens of nameless workers who grease the wheels of a busy restaurant, the kind of person who shows up early, stays late, and prays that rent waits one more week. My shoes were worn thin, the soles nearly splitting, and sweat clung to my shirt so heavy it felt like another layer of skin. My hands burned from hours of chopping onions and stirring hot pots, but the worst pain wasn't physical, it was the hollow ache in my belly. That night was my second double shift in a row, and in the rush to catch the early bus I hadn't packed food. I told myself I'd eat when I got home, but home was still hours away. And the thought of stepping into that small apartment with nothing but silence in the fridge was crushing. The smell of grilled steak, garlic butter, and warm bread filled the air around me, but I couldn't touch any of it. That was for the customers, not for me. By the time the dinner rush ended, my vision blurred. The fluorescent lights felt harsher, the sound sharper, the air heavier. Reached toward a leftover bread heel resting near the trash bin. And in that moment I wasn't a cook anymore. I was just a desperate man. But before my fingers closed around it, I froze. The server walked by balancing trays of drinks, and her glance caught me. She didn't mean harm, but her raised eyebrow, that fleeting look, made me feel exposed, humiliated. I pulled back my hand as if I had touched fire. In that split second I felt invisible, less than human, as though my hunger wasn't just. Empty stomach it was proof I didn't belong. What I didn't realize was that someone else was watching quietly from the shadows, at the far corner, where steam fogged the air and the constant hiss of hot water filled the background, stood Hector. He was the dishwasher, older than most of us, his back slightly bent from years of lifting, his hands always red and raw from endless scrubbing. Hector rarely spoke. Faint. He hummed to himself sometimes, soft melodies no one could recognize, and he kept his head down. Too many, he was just part of the noise of the kitchen, the clang of dishes, the whoosh of sprayers, the slam of racks. But that night, he wasn't just humming. He kept glancing at me, and I didn't yet understand why. The servers laughed about. Tips, their voices bright and careless. Managers barked about closing checklists. Everyone had somewhere to be, something to eat, someone waiting at home. And I faded further into the background, a shadow moving between the fryer and the prep table. But Hector's eyes followed me. Later, I would learn why. For now, all I saw was a weary man stacking plates higher than his shoulders, quietly humming as the rest of the world rushed by without caring. Kindness, nugget number 1, people who feel invisible. Often notice those who are overlooked because they know the sting themselves. The night dragged until finally. The last plate was washed and the final table cleared. The air shifted quieter now, like the building itself exhaled. I leaned against the prep counter, dizzy, bracing myself for the long commute home on an empty stomach. And then without a word, Hector appeared at my side. He slid a plate onto the stainless steel surface in front of me. I blinked. It wasn't scraps, not the half-eaten remains I'd sometimes seen staff sneak when managers weren't looking. No, this was a full plate. Steaming rice, roasted chicken, as a warm roll that still glistened with butter. For a moment, I couldn't move. My throat tightened, my chest ached, and my stomach twisted with longing and disbelief. I looked at him, searching for words, but Hector only nodded once, firmly, and pushed the plate closer. He didn't ask, didn't explain, he just gave. My eyes stung as I picked up the fork. Each bite was heavy with more than flavor it was. Dignity, humanity, the reminder that I wasn't invisible after all. What I didn't know in that moment was that this meal wasn't some extra portion set aside casually. Hector had paid for it himself, out of his own meager check. At the start of the shift, he had told the prep cook to ring up a plate for him. he never ate it. He'd been waiting, watching. And when he saw me falter, he decided this was mine only. Later did I learn the deeper truth. Hector had crossed a border years ago with nothing but stale tortillas in his pocket. He knew the gnawing emptiness of hunger not as an inconvenience, but as a companion. He recognized the hollow look in my eyes because he had worn it himself once. That night, his sacrifice was quiet, almost invisible, but it was as sharp and real as the blade I had used to slice onions all day. When I ate, I nearly sobbed, the food blurring with saltwater tears. Every bite wasn't just calories, it was proof I was still human, still worth the effort. Between mouthfuls, Hector leaned close and whispered in accented English, "Don't let hunger make you forget who you are." And then, without waiting for a reply, he turned back to his sink, submerging his hands once more into scalding water, as if nothing remarkable had happened. But to me, everything had shifted. Kindness nugget number 2. Food is never just food, it's dignity, survival, and memory woven together. Offering people proof that they matter. Screenshot this in your heart. Kindness is feeding someone's hunger before they even ask. Share it with someone who needs hope tonight, because hope is contagious. In the weeks that followed, something inside me changed. I couldn't forget the sight of that steaming plate placed before me with such silent care. Without planning, I found myself saving half my sandwich during lunch breaks, leaving it with the homeless man who sat near my bus stop every evening. A few days later, one of the servers started bringing extra rolls to the back, setting them near the dish pit with a smile. Another cook put a jar by the time clock labeled Food Drive Fund, tossing in loose change. Slowly, kindness began to ripple outward like water spreading from a stone. Small sparks caught and burned quietly, until even the manager, hardened and busy, began nodding in approval instead of scolding. All of it traced back to Hector's simple act. The dish pit, once the loneliest corner of the kitchen, had become its beating heart. Weeks later, one night after close, I found Hector sitting alone in the staff room, staring at a torn photograph. It was of a little girl, maybe 5, her smile wide, standing in front of a weathered house. His eyes softened when he saw me looking. "My daughter," he whispered. He had left her years ago to work, to send money home, to give her chances. He never had. He hadn't held her in years. Every plate he scrubbed, every aching night bent over the sink was for her. And in that moment, I understood that plate of food he gave me wasn't just kindness. It was a transfer of love he couldn't give directly to his child. By feeding me, he was feeding her too, in some distant, invisible way. His sacrifice was hidden, but it was endless. Kindness nugget number 3. Sometimes the kindest people are those carrying the heaviest unseen burdens that they choose to give anyway. From that night forward, I promised myself I'd never call an act of kindness small. There is no small kindness. For someone starving, lonely, or forgotten, one act can mean the difference between despair and survival. Hector taught me that kindness isn't loud, it doesn't need applause, it doesn't demand notice. True kindness is steady, quiet, and it saves lives in ways the world may never see. A month later, Hector was gone. One morning, his apron was folded neatly on the counter, his name tag resting on top. No explanation, no goodbye. The kitchen felt hollow without his humming. Weeks passed before I finally got a letter folded into my paycheck envelope as if it had been slipped there secretly. The handwriting was shaky, but strong. It said only this: "I am home with her now. No return address, no explanation. It's just that." And I sat there, staring at those words, realizing that sometimes kindness disappears not because it ends, but because it has finally reached the place it was always meant to go. And that is why I tell this story, because Hector's plate was more than food. It was dignity. It was memory. It was proof that even in the harshest places, kindness is alive. And if you carry nothing else from this video, carry this truth. Invisible people are often the ones keeping the rest of us alive. And next week, we'll share the story of the forgotten child whose song silenced an entire city.